We'll forgive Chicago Bears fans if they're still having nightmares of Brett Favre. The three-time NFL MVP made it a yearly mission to carve through the Bears defense and carry the Green Bay Packers and later the Minnesota Vikings to victory. Now, Favre spent much of 2 decades taking care of business against the Bears. But did you know he was once extremely interested in helping his former rivals return to the Super Bowl? By the time the 2011 season opened, it felt like we'd finally seen the last of Favre. After several years of retiring and then coming back to the NFL and retiring again, the grizzled gunslinger had likely played his last down. Injuries and inconsistency had ruined any hopes Favre had of bringing the Vikings to the Super Bowl, much less the playoffs, the year before. Understandably, the 2011 season progressed without any teams reportedly reaching out to Favre. Now, the lockout might have played a role, but Favre was 42 years old and likely wasn't joining a lesser team solely to be a backup. But injuries do happen, and the Chicago Bears lost starting quarterback Jay Cutler to a fractured thumb in November. Although the Bears hoped that backup Caleb Haney could extend their 5-game winning streak, he instead threw 3 interceptions in a 25-20 loss to the Oakland Raiders. The next week, Haney threw another 3 interceptions in a 10-3 loss to the mediocre Kansas City Chiefs. Suddenly, the once 7-3 Bears were 7-5 and falling quickly. Cutler wasn't anywhere close to returning, and the Bears needed a spark. Favre, after years of beating up on the Bears, was willing to be that spark. According to ESPN's Michael C. Wright, a source familiar with Favre believed the veteran quarterback would listen if the Bears pitched him on joining the team in December 2011. At the time, Favre primarily spent his time hunting, working out, and staying in shape. However, the source didn't believe Favre would definitely unretire, again, to suit up for the Bears. Now, for what it's worth, Bears coach Lovie Smith dismissed the idea of adding another quarterback, and several players publicly backed Haney. At the time, the Bears had veteran Josh McCown and 5th-round pick Nathan Enderle. It's okay if you have no idea who he is. At the time, ESPN made it clear the NFL had all but moved on from Favre. Despite needing to add quarterbacks around the same time, neither the Houston Texans nor the Kansas City Chiefs reached out to the Southern Miss product. Houston, which wound up winning the AFC South, later signed former Carolina Panthers standout Jake Delhomme. Kansas City, meanwhile, had signed ex-Bears and Denver Broncos quarterback Kyle Orton. As for the Bears, although reports linked them to former Pro Bowl quarterback Donovan McNabb following his release from the Minnesota Vikings, Chicago stuck with what they had. Alas, neither Haney nor McCown could right the ship, and the Bears lost 5 straight before a meaningless season-ending victory over the Vikings. 7-3 turned to 8-8, and the Bears missed the playoffs entirely. Amazingly, a team would reach out to Favre in the coming years. The St. Louis Rams called the Packers great in October 2013 following Sam Bradford's torn ACL. But by that point, the 44-year-old Favre decided he'd rather stick to his life of being a grandfather, riding his tractor, and making jeans commercials. The Rams instead went with Kellen Clemens, who ironically had served as Favre's backup on the New York Jets in 2008. It's like poetry. The idea of Favre coming out of retirement late in the 2011 season and leading the Bears to a playoff berth is fascinating. The Detroit Lions and Atlanta Falcons each reached the playoffs that year as a wild card with 10 wins. Chicago defeated Atlanta 30-12 in Week 1 and split their 2 games with the Bears. So theoretically speaking, Favre likely would have needed to defeat 2 of 4 teams, Denver, Seattle, Green Bay, and Minnesota, to earn 10 wins and make the playoffs. Only one of those games, a 38-14 loss to the Seahawks, came at home. And by the way, that's even assuming he, and not Haney, would have started that eventual 13-10 overtime loss to Tim Tebow and the Broncos. But Favre never got that chance, and he entered the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2016. Packers fans never had to grab the bleach after seeing one of their greatest players suit up in the Chicago Bears uniform. Here on Legacy Library, these are the stories in sports we love exploring. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and please stay tuned for more.